Last week, the National Labor Relations Board president issued a memorandum stating that college athletes are employees of the universities they play at and therefore have the right to unionize. The memo goes on to say universities are subject to investigation if they interfere with athletes' organizing efforts, and that schools could be targeted if they continue to call players, quote, student athletes.
Team Rising is here to discuss. Joining now are Nomiki Konst, director at Matriarch and former candidate for New York City Public Advocate, and Rachel Bovard, senior director of policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute. Welcome to you both.
Hello.
Good morning, guys.
Nomiki, what is your response to this? Is it finally time to treat student athletes with the dignity they deserve, with the opportunity, to have some control over their own destinies in these ridiculous programs where their colleges have all the power and they can't do anything on behalf of themselves?
You've basically stolen the words out of my mouth. Yes, it's about time. I mean, this is a system, the NCAA is a feudal system, as if they are completely exempt from normal labor practices under the guise of student athleticism. I mean, for folks who, I'm sure most folks who are watching are aware that this is a grueling sport. And by the time many of these athletes are out of college, or if they make it into the pros, their bodies are worn down and they've basically used up the best years of their lives on this sport. And it's sort of a gamble, whether or not they make it into the pros and are they're able to financially succeed is a bet. So yes, they deserve to be paid. Not only that, it takes so much time and energy away from the actual academia that they're doing. And they're forced to, hit certain targets and have certain grades to stay in the sport when this is grueling, it's time intensive, it's hard on their bodies. And I think that, in the United States of America in 2020, yes, they should have the rights. It's not like they're not making money on this sport. It's not like the television advertisements aren't, generating enough income for the NCAA. So I think this is a good move. And, as has been ruled on before and has been argued before on behalf of different athletes, they should also get a cut of that advertisement pay.
Right, and if you take football, for instance, obviously a very few number of college athletes make it into the NFL, but even once they make it into the NFL, the average career is like 3 years. And they're subject to these kind of maximum wages. Most of them are subject to these maximum wages the first couple of years. So, people think of these athletes as walking away from their careers with millions, but 99.99% aren't gonna walk away basically broke. But Rachel, where do you come down on this question of paying college athletes?
I think it's something that I think should be explored. I go back to the decision kind of that made it possible from the Supreme Court, which was one of my favorite cases from the last term. Basically, Brett Kavanaugh shredded the NCAA and went after them on the basis of product definition. There's something in antitrust law called product definition, where you're saying, no, my product's unique and therefore I should be immune, from antitrust enforcement. And Kavanaugh was like, you're literally arguing that your product is based on paying, these athletes poorly. You cannot get around, fair wage laws by claiming that your product, the whole thesis is to pay workers like crap. And that's essentially what they were doing. So, I'm kind of interested to see, where this goes. I'm interested mostly, I think, in the mechanics of it. How are these athletes actually going to put their demands forward? Are they going to be represented by someone? How is this all going to work? I think that's something that's going to be, somewhat complicated. And I think you also have the viewership aspect, right? Most of the things, the leverage that you have as a union to strike, to walk away, the athlete's value is tied up in performance. So if that performance, I'm not sure how much leverage they have in that regard. So I think the mechanics of this will be interesting to watch.
Yeah, well, and college athletes are prohibited from, under NCAA rules, from profiting from their own images, from merchandise, and that kind of thing. Yeah. That would be, that's one vehicle that some, not all of them obviously, but some could make money off that without drawing a salary. But that has been prohibited, and I believe absolutely should not be prohibited. The other thing is that these. Especially at when we're talking about basketball, football, many of the athletes are not. There's only a loose association between what they're doing in terms of athletics and the academic mission of the college. They're not showing up to their classes. Other people are doing their homework. There's routinely, we're caught up in these kinds of scandals. Is the solution, my idea, I'll ask you how you feel about this, Namiki, is we should probably separate them into club sports and just like not actually have it be students enrolled in the university, because it's this kind of ridiculous idea that they're actually there because to study and they're also playing sports. No, they're there to play sports. It's kind of dumb.
I mean, listen, I'm not an expert, and I was not a college athlete, shocker. So I can't tell you how grueling it is to keep up with the academia, but I assume it's tough. But does that mean that you eliminate it altogether? I don't know. I mean, I leave that to the experts to decide. I think there is value in receiving an education. Maybe there's some way of incorporating that into the process in a more thoughtful way that actually gives a. You're in college sports. You're not in professional sports. Otherwise, why don't you just call it the minor leagues? I mean, if you're going to completely disassociate it from college, is it just go team go? I think maybe there's a larger conversation just to be had about what is the utility of college sports, and should they just be separated out entirely into some form of a minor league?
That's what I think it should be. It should be a minor league with the team names reflect the school, and that's what I would do. But I'm not in charge of the NCAA.
But I think a lot of players do go to class. A lot of players do get a lot out of it, and a significant.
Not in the major two sports, though. Not in football, basketball.
Some, and then they should. Like, because as to Nomiki's point, it is college. It is still college, and there is a benefit to people to being educated. Like, just spiritually, psychically. I mean, Rachel, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if we strip it from the educational value, then it does take on a different form. If that's what we're going to do, I think that will have, some sort of consequences for also why people watch. I don't consider myself an expert in college sports, but I know a lot of people who are fanatics about it. And the reason they watch is because they think these guys are amateurs, right? They're not in the pros. They're not being, having all these incentives to do certain things. They're doing it for the love of the game, right? Whether or not that still exists, I don't know. But that's a big draw for why people watch. And so that's an element in all of this, that I think makes this debate significant. You can't forget about it, because at the end of the day, that's what's bringing in the money, is the viewers.
Right.
And the viewers may have gone to that school too, which is,
that's
right.
why. Right. And if you're like some freak like Auburn fan and you didn't go to Auburn, it's like weird.
I should follow up on what I just said. So the students now, beginning of just a few weeks ago, the students will be able to profit off their names, images, and likenesses, which is a good thing to kind of move them in the position to not be treated like absolute serfs. I don't know. I'm more skeptical to the psychological benefit of education. Sure, it's better to get an education than to not get an education, like in a vacuum. But there's always trade-offs. What else could they be doing with their time? What else could they be?
But if we're trying to solve labor abuses, the minor leagues are not the direction to go, because the minors, people there are making less than a minimum wage. They're going into debt to pay for their motels. They're living out of their cars, and most of them are not making it into the major leagues either. And people pay $1 to go see the game, and it's fun for those local communities, but it doesn't generate the kind of revenue that like in Alabama or in Auburn does, for the reasons that Nomiki talked about. That there's this nostalgia that people are kind of participating in every weekend. That they don't have with like the Reading Phillies.
Right. There's something about not tricking people into thinking, oh yeah, you're students and we just want you to play sports on the side. We want you to play sports. That's the main thing. Thank you both for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.